If you want to know how to turn a help letter into a love adventure, stay tuned. This letter, sleeping for 50 years, can actually awaken everyone's curiosity, but Sophie is different. She thinks this is just the open. For her, our response is definitely better than disappointment. So while colleagues are clocking out, Sophie is still lost in her own little world. She earnestly pours all her blessings on love into Claire's reply, as if she were writing a romantic novel. Then she seals the 50-year-old letter and her new postcard in an envelope. Who would have thought this would become a turning point in her fate? A few days later, a sharply dressed gentleman suddenly appears in a secret base, looking like a Seven investigator. Sophie was super excited, thinking everyone would share the surprise, but Charlie blasted her instead. He opened his mouth with the rant, "What are you thinking?" I was thinking what kind of answer she should give. What happened 50 years ago may not matter now. She completely didn't realize the trouble this letter caused Claire. But Sophie had no idea that Charlie was fuming. Clearly, his grandma's attitude had him extremely mad. "So you came from London to lecture me?" "No, I'm here as I can't keep grandma near her home." Sophie couldn't believe it. Claire travelled thousands of miles. Clearly she hadn't forgotten that youthful first love. Perhaps that lost love left a cherished memory. To uncover Claire's true feelings, Sophie quietly followed Charlie and eventually found Claire in front of a wall plastered with sticky notes. Although time has left marks on Claire's face, her elegant charm is still as warm as sunshine. "Hello, Claire. I'm Sophie, guess what? I wrote you a letter." When Claire realized Sophie was the one who wrote to her, she was over the moon. Claire and Sophie sat together and began sharing her exciting stories about Lorenza. A ring she received 50 years ago still remains on her hand. While she lived happily after, there's still a hint of regret in her heart. If I had been just a bit braver back then, maybe my life would be completely different. Claire decided to write down this touching story to fulfill her dream of being a writer. Even though Charlie disagreed, she didn't really mind. Fortunately, Claire was willing to let Sophie join her. So the next morning, the three of them set out on their journey. Sophie shared this news with her fiancé, but he didn't respond much. By the way, he was participating in an auction and was a bit happy about it. The scenery was picturesque. Claire and Sophie shared their stories, but little did they know, the driver had his own plans in mind. The vehicle stopped in front of an old house, and Claire remembered that the person she was searching for lived here. She braved knocking on the door, but a silver-haired elder answered, "Oh no, not the right person." He had to leave the old man's place. Sophie checked online and found out there are 74 people named Lorenzo in the town. Finding Lorenzo among the sea of people is certainly not easy, but Claire believes he couldn't be too far away. Because she knows Lorenzo loves this land, she decides to rule out people from the city. It looks like a full-blown search is about to begin, but before that, Sophie called her fiancé to report on her plans. Meanwhile, her fiancé was at the auction. Hearing Sophie had plans made him quite happy, as he didn't want to accompany her. Sophie felt a pang of disappointment, as they originally came to Italy for a honeymoon, but he was always busy studying dishes. His obsession with food made him lose track of time, even studying the width of a noodle till doomsday. For a trip for two, they just orbited each other. Quite comical. They set out in the quest for love once again, driving on the country roads, while Sophie was desperately writing a beautiful love story in the car. Many Lorenzas made appearances. Some were suave old artists, and some were carefree playboys past 50. And there was a billionaire who fell for Claire at first sight and promised to stay by her side, but sadly, his obsession made him unable to choose. However, during this journey, Claire noticed that the relationship between Charlie and Sophie seemed a bit unpleasant. It might be because of that letter, so Claire suggested Charlie tell Sophie his story of justice. Sophie didn't expect Charlie had such an admirable side, and Charlie was a bit puzzled by it too. But in front of Sophie, he always acted like a hedgehog. After much thought, he believed the problem stemmed from that letter. If not for it, maybe none of this would have happened. In fact, he knew Sophie was a kind and warm girl, which complicated his emotions. One quiet night, Charlie took the initiative to find Sophie. He wanted to understand how he was portrayed in her story. However, their first exchange ended in failure. Charlie was determined not to give up and silently vowed. The next day, a sunny afternoon, he again invited Sophie shopping, streets bustling. Under the warm sun, they gradually opened their hearts, and Charlie shared his sad childhood. It turned out Charlie lost both parents in a car accident when he was 10 and had to rely on his grandmother during those tough days. Though they sank into sorrow for a long time, time would heal wounds, and Charlie could calmly talk about the tragedy of the past. Sophie's childhood was equally unfortunate. Her mother abandoned her when she was 9, and she hasn't seen her since. In this unfamiliar city, they left their past pains behind and became close friends. Even Sophie was willing to share her story. The video ends here. If you enjoyed this content, please remember to subscribe to our channel.